Awesome. Alex Archawski is the president of Sales Evolution, has a background as a sales executive. And actually, you went through the Sales Evolution program about 14, 15 years ago. It looks like, is that right?
Correct.
And then before that, you were in the military.
I
Um,
had a couple professional stints when I got out of the service. I was director of sales, working for Fortune 500, kind of a mixed area of sales and leadership and strategy. And then I found myself with Sales Evolution, came back full circle to wanting to help my mentor, and then he eventually retired and bought out the company.
Very cool. Where are you from originally, Alex?
I was born in Paris, France. Immigrated here when I was 4 or 5 years old. All my family's in France, so still connected with them, visit them on a regular basis. But my dad moved here for business.
Very cool. When you were 5 years old, what was that transition like?
I was so young, but at that time I remember everything because our two ancestors removed, my great grandfather was really more involved with shipbuilding. And so we were on the Queen Elizabeth II when we immigrated from Le Havre, France to New York City. So I was on my father's shoulders under the Verrazano Bridge in 1978, one of those last generations with all our stuff and furniture on the QE2. So I felt like I was probably the last person to immigrate with a ship, like you hear the stories of the 1920s.
That's a really cool story.
It was. I can still remember it because I thought the bridge was going to hit me because of how close we were. And as when you're a little kid, you kind of everything's. But seeing the Statue of Liberty arrive, I mean, it was just everything that you can imagine. You know, it's the way that they set it up. And if you've never come in by ship to New York, it doesn't matter if you're an immigrant or not. It's spectacular to see New York by water.
I mean, it sounds like the happy version of like Godfather, the Godfather story with was it Vito immigrating into New York, but the happy version with the family and Queen Elizabeth and all this. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you still speak? Do you speak French?
I do. I think the dialect's a little bit different. I think my French family will tell you I speak Canadian. I think, so, but I still know that I still have my isms, and, there's a couple of sound bites. Most people don't realize, like when you say like in America, we have a version in France. It's kind of like a buffer word, and the buffer word in French, people don't understand. My wife, it was like, what is that word? So it's buff, and buff means like, either meat or something else, but like buff is like so everybody's got their expression words, and most people don't know that in languages, that when they learn languages, is, we have all these words we use to break up the words, and France is just like that.
That's cool that you've kept your culture with you, through this journey. Did you join the military as an officer or as an enlisted soldier?
Great question. So my father served, and the French Navy used to come to Philadelphia to pick up a lot of sailors, including his, from New York to DC. So that influenced me to serve. When you're around it, if your father was a doctor, you could be a doctor. You're influenced a lot, but he was part-time. He wasn't full-time. And so at this point I went to college, and then my father lost almost everything just due to circumstances with work and leaving and not being able to rebound. So I could not finish college, ran out of money. I know I wanted to serve. So I went in thinking that I was going to go to the officer candidate school. But I'd stayed in enlisted because of the program that I was able to do it, and then just wrote it out. And then I had a degree by the time I finished.
What was that last thing you said? You had to do what by the time you finished?
I had a degree by the time I finished. I had my bachelor's within, the military. So it wasn't a traditional way of finishing it, but I didn't want to go to officer candidate school because of the program I was in the military. means that I had to renew for a really certain amount of years, and I wasn't sure about that.
Sure. And so where did you end up going to school?
To college, I
Yeah.
went down to a small private school down in Virginia called Randolph-Macon.
Okay.
Randolph-Macon College. Once I saw Dave Matthews play at a college fraternity party, and in the 1990s, I said, "Okay, well, I'm hooked. This is the school I'm going to play. I'm going to go to." I don't know
What a
what
great
course they're
reason to
offering.
go.
What's that?
I said, what a great reason to go. Like you were seeing
I
like the
think that's
fun and
everybody.
social side.
Right, right. I didn't visit any of the dorms or the classes. I just said, I think this is it.
So what did you do in the military?
You have to choose a rate when you sign up, you have to choose a profession. So you can do anything that you want based on the score you take, which is an ASVAB, which means the level of, I wouldn't say an intelligence score, but based where you are, they give you the options of what to take. So I was given electronic warfare. Electronic warfare is really more signal intelligence, but I really wanted to be a search and rescue swimmer, and that's was what I became and focused on with also an obligation. So I almost had like two jobs in the military, but everything revolving around a search and rescue swimmer was what I was focused on.
Wow. So you were how many years were you a search and rescue swimmer in the military?
A total of three, and then when I was in the reserves, I was really something else in the reserves.
Sure.
Just a total number of 3 years.
And can I ask, like, how did the what your dad uh, like the not being able to finish college and with the hardships that your dad like were going through in the family, it sounds like the family hardships, how did that like impact you? And you know
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a little deeper dive in there as I was dyslexic when I grew up. I was taught French and then taught English. So my confidence level was really, really bad. And to kind of share a little story of that is kind of in there is there's a lot of things that I had to overcome. And I finally overcame it with a couple things, which is the military just helped me become a better, confident person, structured person. So when you have confidence, you can put structure in place. If you're not confident, it's very hard to put structure in place. So to be able to do more things with more confidence, with other people teaching you how to be more confident with accountability, if that makes sense. So
totally.
it's not for everybody, but at that time I know I needed to finish the degree, but I also welcomed, how to challenge myself to be a better version of who I was. So I mean, it went really fast of saying, okay, now try this, and communication level was non-existent. But I took my first stab at it because I sold Cutco knives in high school, and that was the first bout of battling dyslexic. I still have it today. Still have it a little bit.
I'm also dyslexic.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
my father.
it's very hard, and sometimes plus being bilingual too. So I use French words and sometimes misread numbers and letters. So it's
Yeah.
it's a triangular of my wife just nods from now on.
She just nods.
She basically
um,
can, she doesn't need Google for me anymore to figure out what I say.
yeah, she's being able to decode it.
Correct.
And so how, it's interesting, I believe also Richard Branson has dyslexia, and just different business leaders that have some sort of like learning disability, and potentially had to work through it or just overcome it. So good, good on you for not letting you stop you, because I think it can really make the difference for a family or not. Like, is there an excuse there, or do we work through it and rise above it? So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was challenging all around, but I think in hindsight, you see it now of where some challenges are people and where they're coming from as they're getting into their professional lives. You know.
yeah, and a little bit more empathy and like understanding.
Yeah.
It's interesting like how a lot of I don't want to say HR because that might be an oversimplification. Maybe it's more of just like a business philosophy around really having people rise with their strength and not focusing so much on the weaknesses, and like really, like really leveraging those strengths. Um, How did you decide to get into sales?
Um, I think that seeing the power, the trainer that I had for Cutco knives was amazing. He believed in the product and service, made us believe into it, and believed in us that we could sell it, even though it was regular knives. So there was something magical, and the brand is so strong because of that. It's very strong because of that. It was really the people behind that. So I saw that as, I can influence others, not, and hold a dialogue and share the reasons why they need things, right? But then I just found a connection to that. And then from there, really about something very complicated that could be new, that's never been sold, consultative selling, outsourcing for medical devices and things that I loved the complexity of just long sales cycles, right? And the long sales cycles really, it's challenging, and I love that challenge. And then just the strategy of it is saying, are the margins right? Is the market right? What does our buyers look like? What does accounts look like? And just, the inquisitiveness of just, sometimes the word is self-correcting or self-adjusting or proficiency and efficiency. And from there, I realized that was really more on the military side of just because you're doing something doesn't mean you're good at it. And so the military really was about how to stay sharp and continue even though you were doing something. So I felt that I was just naturally trying to do that with sales, with some good leaders and some good individuals behind the scenes.
So it sounds like you fell in love with it before the military, like through Cutco.
I did. So I was lucky that I knew that I wanted to do something around that profession. It can be hard transitioning out. There's no doubt about it. So
Transitioning out of the military?
oh yeah,
Yeah, totally.
When you transition out of the military, it could be very, very difficult. So in that aspect of things, you just have to form a new identity. And forming a new identity can be very challenging for anybody, because you're everything you've done in life is already established, and you get comfort. You have your friends, you have your network, you have your identity of your who you are, and then you're told you got to be somebody else, and nobody's around that you knew. So it's different from college, because transition's really more of an empty feeling, like what is my worth? Who am I? And that's why I assist in that passion area of the causes that I'm in to do that. But I'm looking at it at saying, okay, we got to accelerate that process. It was a little bit of a hang up in there, similar to sales. You got to sell yourself in order to get a job. So it's very much the same.
Yeah, it's just like how often we have to sell just changes, right? When we're doing the job, it's like once every 3 to 5 years or whatever, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Versus every day. Yeah, I want to just highlight that too. The Veterans Network, the Greater Philadelphia Veterans Network that you like empower, right? Is that an organization that you started?
It is. I started. Transitioned twice out of the service. And when you transition twice out of the service, first time active duty, second time as a reservist, I got recalled back to active duty, lost my job right before, put all my stuff in storage, proposed to my wife, went overseas, didn't have a job when I came back, I saw the system was broken. I was thinking, okay, well, if I have to look for a job again, how can I make this easier? Where are the veterans in our city? And how did they get there? And let's really share best practices on supporting one another, empowerment, and how does our community look at veterans and in the hindsight of what they read in the news or how they view things. And I said, okay, there's a disconnect because they look at us very hourly rate. They don't look at us as a professional. A lot of us, 17, 18, 19 years old, have a paycheck and healthcare benefits, and we have to report at 7 a.m. for a job. So they didn't look at it like we're professionals when we come out. We're already disciplined professionals. We know how to work and go to the office. So there was a disconnect. So I saw that, let's bridge the gap of all that knowledge and make sure the community knows how to hire, make sure the veterans are well-versed in pitching themselves.
Wow. I'd like to dive deeper into that. Yeah, later on. I was really touched by a quote that I saw about like your life accomplishment will be measured by the amount of human impact you've delivered. And you know, um, I think there's just I really want to understand like the why around that for you.
I think it comes in phases for people. Some people do it at the end of their career, so they give back monetarily. They're just so focused on themselves, which is nothing wrong. They're just so focused in the energy and the time, the commitment to get their companies going, and then they give back when they have gray hair. That used to be kind of like the era, but now things have changed where I think people are giving back and trying to succeed at the same time. It's an art and a science. But I found more joy coaching Little League, leading Cub Scouts. If little Johnny didn't have any confidence, how do we build confidence around, the next generation? There's people that are all stars. They hit the ball, they pitch the ball. I don't have to worry about them. They're going to be great in life. It's just the average people. And sometimes I realize, I said, man, it took me so long to get where I am. Let's make sure that nobody goes through that journey of understanding their strengths. So how do we get people to really come out early in failures? How are you going to deal with failure as a young kid? How are you going to be challenged as a young kid? So that there's good, and it's great. I get excited to see that. One of my favorite ones. Do you mind if I share this part?
Sure, yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't want to go too long, but I totally respect that. So my son, my teenager, had to make a decision, and he was really upset. He had to make a decision if he was going to play basketball for one of the top teams in the country here, or stick to football, which was very challenging just to do both because of his size and his strength and everything else. So I said, welcome to making a decision. And even as adults, we struggle. So if you make a decision, you're going to get it 60% right. Nobody's 100%, but that will increase your confidence. So making decisions can increase confidence. You see it. So everybody defers in making decisions. So those are the things I enjoy.
You enjoy helping people make decisions? Was that the follow-up?
Basically the human empowerment, how you impact somebody, even if it's not my son or anybody else, seeing them develop, right? How much people have developed, either through veterans, through sales. It's not unlocking and unblocking, I always say. Everybody's got plateaus and they bump into it. But if you help them open up the gate, they can see, okay, well, that wasn't that bad. Let me get another gear and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's the deepest yearning of like the human soul, frankly. And I think it's just like being in touch with that, experiencing it. It can become intoxicating. And then just how do we do that in a, I don't even know if it's strategic. I was going to say strategic way, but I think it's really an authentic way. Is probably like the most, accurate way, for me to think about it. So it's interesting, like the decision piece, one of the resources that has come up in Junto is a book called Decisive. And it's about, how the smartest people and smartest companies make decisions. And it utilizes a methodology called multi-threading, where essentially you come up with like 5 to 8 options to make a decision. And then usually the best choice is a combination of those options. I think for me, one of the most valuable things from learning to make decisions has been just getting in touch with my gut and like learning to like understand. I've heard so many entrepreneurs be like, oh, I use my gut to make decisions. And it's like, well, what does that mean? And like, how do I develop that? And I think it's by like actually making decisions and being wrong and being, willing to fail.
Sorry about that. I don't know how I got on mute. It's practicing the amount of decisions that they come natural, right? And I think what happens, and we've been around those people, they're very quick, they're very good, they understand, and well, we could go sideways in this conversation, but there's decision fatigue. So so you pause, and then all of a sudden you got outstanding decisions to make. And
Yeah.
then you have the ones that are very natural that can make them because they have such good senses of how to make it. And that's how I see in kids' development, as well as we got to protect ourselves from making decisions for them and allowing them to make decisions. There comes a point, it doesn't matter if it's basic thing like clothes, food, uh, play dates. It doesn't matter the age. You gotta make them make those decisions, and it's just our temperament to see them struggle.
Yeah. And teach them how to think, or yeah, allow, teach them to think for themselves, I think is probably the better way to think of it.
Become entrepreneurs, because at the end of the day, they're entrepreneurs of their own success. I mean, entrepreneurs is not the word money in business; it's all the skill sets behind that, right? Self accountability, adjustment, decisions, all these things of human empowerment. Is some people are naturally gifted, and some of them come late in their career.
So like I'm, I'm curious, like when you think of sales, how do you break it out in your head? Is it is it different principles? Is it a 10-step list? Is it a framework? Is it like how would you teach sales to an entrepreneur? Or how do you think about sales?
Well, it really depends on the audience. There's sales professionals, there's non-sales professionals, there's entry, like no clue of sales, there's startup sales. So everybody's got a different way of looking at sales, right? Some are cautious because they need it, but they don't want it. Some need it, and are willing to do the activities. So the best way to approach sales is really to understand, I said, the framework around it is to understand how the dialogue is, and to really go back to understanding the behaviors of a salesperson and their role and responsibility and what a buyer and prospect looks like. It's a 101, and they have to understand the framework. A lot of people miss that. A ton of people miss that. So that's why you see go to demo, presentation. It's me, 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 me. I can't wait to talk, can't wait to talk, can't wait to present. I want to solve world peace with my product and service. And they didn't understand the framework of everybody's going to nod. Everybody's going to say, that's great. I love what you have, but nobody's going to take action on it. So then they're upset, but they didn't understand the framework. So teaching the framework, which I'd be happy to go a little bit into if you want, is important, because then they can understand roles and responsibilities and behaviors.
Yeah. What do you mean by that? Like, can you just kind of go high
Sure.
level? Like, what?
So the best salesperson, because I know I don't want to go too much into like coaching and training, which you're going to get me all geared up here, is the best salesperson is a doctor. Because when you go when you go visit the doctor, who's got the problem? The patient.
Sure. Yeah.
So the doctor doesn't say, thanks for coming. I'm so glad you're here. I have 2-for-1 heart surgery special today. Or here's my diploma from Harvard. Here's my PhD from Johns Hopkins. I'm the best doctor. They don't sell themselves. So the patient is the buyer, and the doctor is there to find out what's the problem. But it's not what they ask, it's how they ask it. So if you have a bad back, the doctor wants to know, how did you get a bad back? I lifted something. How long ago? And they start asking deep and wide questions because they want to understand the answers. Because answers in the world of sales doesn't mean the truth. There's just so many messaging behind answers, and doctors are very good at understanding that this person has had a back problem for 5 years. And why are they here today and they didn't come to see me 5 years ago? And that's the industry standard of a buyer and a seller. The buyer has the problem. They've always had a problem. They've historically had a problem. And then they meet. And then you have to say, why now? I said, well, after a certain amount of years, we saw that we have a software issue. Why didn't you fix it 3 years ago? So understanding how to behave like a doctor and ask really, really good reality testing questions, we call them. And people need to be very patient with that because they feel like they're being very intrusive, but you need to understand the behavior of the buyer to understand, are they going to take the medicine? Are they going to go to rehab? Or are they going to do surgery? One of those needs to happen. So the doctor can't tell them, if you're prescribing before diagnosing, it's malpractice. So that's the biggest soundbite in sales. If you're prescribing before diagnosis, malpractice. So when a software company sees the problem before even articulating, they're like, "Oh, we have the solution. Here it is. Here it is. Here's the PowerPoint. Here's this." It's too early. The doctor doesn't say anything.
There hasn't been that explorative questions to really understand the need and like the urgency, and also it sounds like build trust.
It does, and
Right.
usually there is a trust, but also to find out the behaviors. Is the person there because the wife sent him there? Did my boss tell me to go to this meeting? So people need to understand it's not just the words, it's the whys. So really the behaviors of sales, the framework of sales, to say what happens when we're really, really able to know, because from there, then you say, okay, this person, if this person doesn't say they can pick up a child, or they pick up their kid, they're going to be in remorse. They're articulating, all I want to do is play with my son. I can't with my back. The doctor keeps asking questions such as, is that important to you? So do you see, you have to see the emotions behind the buyer, and the framework is important, because if you don't see emotions, or you don't understand the urgency, they're going to get fired. We're going to lose $1 million. Where's the urgency conversation? Then doesn't seem, it's a need or a want. So the framework is important. That's why when you ask what's important in sales is, people needs to understand their roles and responsibilities to be a doctor. And they need to understand how patients are the buyers and how they answer.
I love that that's where you start, because frankly, when a salesman doesn't start with questions with me, they kind of like lose me right away. We're interviewing appointment setters right now, and it's one of the like few things that one of the things that I'm looking for. But something else kind of came up for me that I think is more philosophical as it relates to sales, which is like, you said like the pain versus, or the want versus pain, or like need versus want.
Need versus
right?
want.
Yeah. And I think this idea like has come up in business, right? It's like, as an entrepreneur, we need to create painkillers, not vitamins. But it's kind of ironic to me, because I'm a vitamins type of guy. And like I take vitamins, and I'm all about kind of like the preventative and like doing those things like early. And I feel like, I've even been challenged to like, how do we really position things as more of a painkiller? How do we position Junto as more of a painkiller versus a vitamin? And I feel like I'm curious, like, how do you see the role of a salesperson? Some people I think see salespeople as like in a positive light, as people that produce jobs for companies and solve pains and match pains to solutions. And I think some people see it like as more of a manipulative thing. And I'm curious, like, how do you think about that? And how would you, I don't know, how do you think about that?
It depends on the optics. If salespeople believe they're perceived that way, they will never succeed. If they say, "Oh, people look at me as a used car salesman," or else, that's in the mindset. That's self-limited beliefs. If you're there to help, if you're there, that you can make a difference. Doesn't matter if you're selling mechanical work for trucks or whatever it is. It's you're doing the job to the ability where they don't see that, right? So knowledge and training, believe it or not, is a perfect storm. And unfortunately, a lot of companies miss the boat, and they ask people to do things based on not doing it themselves, especially startups asking salespeople, and they don't have the right framework, where all of a sudden the salesperson's like, "Hey, do you want to buy this? Hey, reach out on LinkedIn. Hey, let's set up an appointment." Very aggressive, and that can set people back as well. So the receiving end is, and a lot of people have been burned by sales, and in one way or another. And it's either the way that it was sold, or the way that was followed up, or the way that the phone call was. it wasn't really well done because most buyers and prospects just wanted to be heard. That's all. They just want to be heard.
So that goes to your questions and making them like having them be heard. Um, I remember hearing this acronym around sales called like it was C-Tuna, like it was a CTUNA, and it was like control, trust, um, urgency, need, and affordability. Like understanding it from like those kind of like 5 principles and getting through it that way. Do you have um like a methodology that you go through after, like as far as like answering questions? I kind of want to like pull up our sales at our power hour last Monday. I shared like our sales script with our members, and
Okay.
so later on this I'd love to kind of pull it up and kind of take you through it because I feel like there's a lot of alignment with what you're sharing.
Yeah.
uh, um, and
It's probably aligned. They're all typically the same. The process is important. Now, what could be the difference is the behaviors which are on the sides. So you could say, ask questions, find out who the decision maker is, talk about money. Those are actionable steps in sales. But if you're not attuned to behavior on both sides, so what I mean by behavior is everybody sounds different. Some people are really, really strong personalities and only want to give 10 minutes. Some people are super cautious, higher ed, healthcare, government, slow buyers, which really disrupt salespeople because they don't know how to react to it. Deferring, always asking questions. So understanding behaviorals from the buyers is critical. Then you can go through those steps. And the other side of the ladder that we have is really like who's managing? Who's managing the sale? Are you acquiescing to the buyer, or are you managing them, telling them and setting expectations? One of the key areas that's missed is setting expectations. Thanks for your time. Do you have 30 minutes still, even though we're scheduled for 30? If we bleed over, do you have more time? Sure, I have more time. So you're setting expectations, and then by the end of the call, the biggest thing you tell people is, should we have another meeting? And most people are like, why would I say that? Because I said, if they don't want one, don't schedule it. And that's what happens when people are really disturbed and disrupted about, well, I'm just following a script. And I said, it's not just that. You have to understand the behaviors within there, be very attuned. So we have a big lesson plan on active listening. And today, more than ever, we're reading, we're watching, we're maybe listening, but how deep did we listen? So I think the behaviors of active listening needs to be sharpened to better understand.
I'm so glad you said that. I love active listening, and I feel like when I do it to you, you respond so positively to it, and so it's really cool to hear that it's something that you actually practice. Like before we like I really, what do you, when you say the attitudes piece, I think that's super profound. Like you said, there's a process, but really getting in tune with like the attitudes of the buyer. What do you look for from an attitude standpoint?
Two difference: the attitude of the salesperson, the attitude of the buyer.
Okay.
How are they aligned? Right? You could say, well, this is the decision maker, and that's the need, and have you understood? So what happens typically is they misread the priorities. Of course, I want it. It's like when you invite somebody in your house, you're like, well, I'd love for you to do my electrical in the house. And the electrician's like, well, you have a plumber in right now. You have somebody paving your driveway. You have a roofer. I don't think there's room for us. So especially in software, when people are like, we need to get this done, right? SaaS. And what they fail to mention is, well, we're already doing 2 implementations right now. So understanding the behaviors and understanding innuendos that people, what they didn't say, is important. So you got to read in between the lines. And it's not just active listening, it's just the tone of urgency, of caution, and what that means. So really matching it. So typically what you do is you pause, and then you review. And you review saying, is this what I'm hearing so far? What are your thoughts? Because you can bull rush the whole sale and then they can change their mind, or they said, oh, this is what I meant, or this is not really, I don't know how that came. So we even say things that we're like, well, let me help go deeper in that area, right?
Yeah.
So understanding all those stuff, and not having preconceived notions as a salesperson is the number one issue. So, oh, I've already had a buyer like this before, or, oh, another one of those prospects, and it's not going to work.
Yeah, because we're just bull rushing it and trying to create a result that might not be authentic based on the situation they're in, because they're doing two implementations right now, right, or whatever.
Correct. It's a little bit like the Matrix, that sales is we try to protect people from themselves. So if they're going to a big meeting, you cannot end another meeting to jump into that sales call. There's nothing good that happens. You're basically going from one to the other. And I'm not talking about sales. It could be just internal to you. You derive outcomes. So for us, we're about outcomes and not guessing. You can't guess what the outcome of the call is going to be. If not, you're going to make it up. You need more people in the room, then that's the outcome. You need to talk about timeline, then that's the outcome. And if not, it's not rehearsed and planned. It's very hard to manage that call. So you have to really, really have setting expectations, know your outcomes, how to hit them at the right time, and it's practice. There's no doubt about it. It's all practice and behaviors, and not to be sidetracked. So you're coming in with a quarter of the tank empty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're saying and that ties to the attitude of the salesperson.
Right. So how they're coming to the call.
Yeah.
How did they protect themselves from the time? Because of today, more than ever, you could go Zoom, right? Meeting Zoom, whatever it is. You're not really putting yourself and saying a mental checklist. The most successful ones really do it, even if it takes a minute or two, right? But they are really attuned to say, every style is different, but not everybody's Michael Jordan in sales. And those people don't need that. They can jump one to the other, to the other, to the other. The average population needs a little bit of time to make sure they're not guessing. So if he or she takes me there, I'm going to go here. If they take me there, I'll know my response. You got to know it's very much, believe it or not, like military planning. You could go this way, but you may need to navigate left and right if they take you that way. And you can see the people that are planned at that.
Yeah, and I think part of it also is preparing for the call, looking at the person and really understanding their business, or who they are, right? Going into it to help match that, to start percolating on questions and how to tie benefits and things together.
Absolutely.
One of the most profound things that I learned from a sales perspective was around trial closing, essentially, rather than just being like, so do you want to yes or, putting people to a yes or no, asking more of an open-ended question of how would this work within your business? What stands out to you so far? Questions like that, to start getting that information around the priorities and understanding it. And that was a game changer, to be able to even start better speaking to their pains and how Junto and our solution would benefit them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. You're meeting them to where their needs are and what they think about trials. And trials could be good, it could be bad, for people, and you understand how they use it. That is one of the biggest challenge we see in not to say everybody's in technology, but we're just talking a lot of SaaS that's around, is there's no setting expectations in technology right now. So everybody's giving out, a lot of people are giving out free trials. Say, hey, they want the trial, let's regroup afterwards. Honestly, what we do is with no trial can begin without a commitment, and that's the outcome, and that's not guessing. So that when it says, what do you mean by that? I said, well, if they're going to do a trial, that means resources internally for the organization that's selling it. So if you give them a trial and you say, Bob, if we exceed expectations in the trial, do we have a commitment to move forward? So you got to know ahead of time what they're thinking, just rather than sniffing around and making excuses. And who is the person driving this trial? Because sometimes those behaviors need to be set early. If not, they don't use it properly. So there is some challenges of setting expectations. That's why driving and managing sales is hard. It's really hard because you got to make sure that you're not guessing that they're going to derail you. You got to make sure that you're asking such deep-rooted doctor questions. And like, listen, if you take the medicine, you go to the pharmacy, are you going to be able to take it once a day? Right. So they trust the patient, but they need to know the behavior of the patient, because that means it's their success as a doctor. And it's a lot of work.
So I hear you keep on saying like taking the guessing out of it, and I love that. Like, how do you know? And I saw that on your site too. Can you tell me like what that means to you, and like how you go about doing that?
Well, I mean, I think we have students that come back, or everybody comes back saying, "Thank goodness I live a guess-free life." So their relationship is no guessing. People bleed it over, not just in sales. It's a life skill, right? So in order not to guess, you can't guess if it's a prospect. You can't guess if it's a decision maker. You can't guess if it's the right time to talk about money. So there's so many innuendos, and you're just like, well, how do I not guess? It says, well, you have to make sure you ask the right questions to get those details to make sure. So if they're saying possibly, you got to go deeper. You don't want to guess what that word possibly means. If they said, sometimes I make the decision, sometimes my partner makes the decision, you don't want to guess what that means. So some people just ask questions to a certain degree. If you're really trying to stay on point and have a seamless process, you got to take the guessing out of everything. Are they going to be a good customer? Are they going to behave well? Are they going to, it's not even just signing the deal, are they going to be a good account that you can do good account management with? And how they work with you, cyber technology, all this new stuff that's out there, and they don't even know how to behave around it. So guess-free selling is really just a process that we put it saying nobody wants to guess. Nobody wants to guess. And let me add another flavor: time management. You don't want to guess what your time management is in sales. You don't want to guess if they're going to return your phone call, and you don't want to guess if that meeting is good or penciled or penned in or whatever. You don't want to guess if there's a follow-up step. All the things in sales you could say around it. So what happens is you got to put work behind it. So that's what the behaviors of making sure, and it's a process. So typically what happens with salespeople when they get great at it, they look at the finish line, and it's like running a marathon. I'm almost there. I'm just going to coast. And they're like, no, you have to be on point at the last finish, last mile, because by this time you're exhausted. I just want them as a client. Let's not screw this up. Everybody's going to be, no. You got to remain in the guest-free process till the end, till you see the dotted signature and they got a check. So it's really where you see people, and it's not rocket science at all. It's just really aligning what people aren't doing well. Or when some people do it well, it's how to do it exceptional. That's typically how it is.
It makes me really want to work with you, like having this conversation. It's really cool to hear the level that you think about it. If I want to actually just make sure that I apply what you're teaching me already too, which is I see I can't believe we've already been talking for 55 minutes. Do you have a hard stop at 12:30 Eastern, or do you have another maybe 30 minutes? And I'll promise.
Oh, I'm good.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So when an entrepreneur is starting to think about like their sales process, how do you recommend like a sales process be created and evolve over time?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is, to understand what they're trying to solve. Very much like we can't give
the customer.
even entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Some entrepreneurs are stuck way in the beginning. They're stuck even in the area of prospecting. So everybody's got their own areas where there's nothing in the pipeline or they can't get anything in the pipeline. Well, that's a whole different discussion. And then there's those in the pipeline where they're really not on point. So it's really understanding where they need to be and want to be better rather than us telling them, here it is, and what they're solving for. So go ahead.
No, so can we start with the like filling that pipeline piece? Because that was actually one of our members' questions was um, keeping the pipeline full. Like how do I keep the pipeline full?
Yeah, so keeping the pipeline full is, coming from an entrepreneur. I think I told you the seller doer model. Let's just use an entrepreneur. If they're delivering the goods and they're selling the goods, it becomes really more of a time management. Where are they seeing it? Are they doing too much marketing and not enough sales? So you got to take a step back first together to say, where are you at and where are you understanding? If it's hit or miss and they don't understand where they're getting their hits and where they're getting their misses, what we do is we set them up into an algorithm scoring. So an algorithm scoring, we call it a toaster. Don't ask me why, just a bit historically, we called it a toaster. It's a very simple Excel spreadsheet that scores you and it has a weighted factor of where you're spending your time in prospecting. Networking events, calling, meeting, referrals, and follow-ups. So really scoring your activity in sales that all deals with prospecting, right? Moving to the next stage. Where are you? What activity? Not the pipeline, but really activities. So what happens is people give their own score and we help them build their score for them based on their time availability. So if they're full-time sales, there's no excuses. If they're seller doers, then we got to figure out what's good for them for the week. And it's really, really the same as working in the gym. Because if you're good at the gym, but you're a little off, there's a reason you burn 800 calories and not 1,600 calories. It's just nobody gave you that knowledge of saying, listen, there's a better way to use the gym. So prospecting is the same. People are all over the place. They try different things. Just no really continuity. So depending on if somebody's local, of course, networking is going to play a big part. But networking can be online now. Your organization is a big platform for people to develop relationships as well, offline, online, whatever it is. So where are people spending their time is important. And then there's a way to get them to focus on that and score themselves, because at the end of the day, they report to themselves. And if you're in the world of being a solopreneur, entrepreneur, you might have an advisory board, you might have a mentor, but they typically don't know what to advise you on unless you tell them, here, keep score on me.
Yeah, here's the KPIs.
Yeah, so keep score on me. I need you to have my back to review my scores with you. If not, some people can do it on their own, and some people might need a wingman or wingwoman to do it. Depends on the individuals, on how they want to get better. It really is. So, and I'm just sharing this with you openly. There's a lot of people that complain about prospecting, but there's very few that are willing to make the change.
The change to do the prospecting?
Change the behaviors in the process.
Change the behavior. And what does that mean to you? Like actually doing the work of getting on LinkedIn and like prospecting or getting on social, like whatever that work is that what you're saying?
It is. And then when more today, they'll be like, wait, get on the phone? And I'm like, listen, you can listen to all that you want out there on the algorithm of emails, and you'll get your prospects on the algorithms. But what happens when you make a call and talk to somebody? So everybody's, not to saying that's the answer, but there's a balance.
Yeah, well, that's the one I'm actually probably most comfortable with in a weird way. But I haven't really done it within this context. So I love like the awareness and challenge around that.
Yeah, and most of it, believe it or not, is and people are more receptive. Is just a role play. Do you know what you're going to say? Do you know how you interrupt somebody's day? Do you know what to say? Then once you say it, then you just keep on the same track, and then you just go down the list. Usually coders and algorithm people and engineers, they're okay with it because they just know it's a process. You don't have to sound, the very same sound bites as before. You don't have to change anything. And some people will take your call and some people won't. If you take it personally, you should not own your own business.
Wow. So is that a belief or an identity thing? Like, I'm curious, like how deep does something like that go?
It's if you take it personally, it starts moving you back, not moving you forward.
Yeah.
So if you take it personally, no, why are you calling me? Get out of my face. And then they had the wrong high school coach. I always say, if you had somebody in your ear growing up, I already was spoken to in a certain way in the military. I'm fine. This is nothing when I get a no compared to what I got in the military, right?
Sure.
In boot camp. But be careful. The area, that's where people really try to avoid the right prospecting areas. And can I share with you something about
Please.
the biggest win in sales?
Yeah, please.
Most people won't believe this. The biggest win in sales is when somebody tells you, no, I'm not interested.
Wow.
Do you know why?
So you don't have to waste time anymore.
Well, why? That's one, but there's a deeper meaning behind that.
Okay.
That
You built a relationship based on like honesty, where the person can actually tell you what they think and they're willing to say something that they know is uncomfortable.
Correct. Because most people don't want to tell the salespeople the truth. And that's just society. So the foundation is you got to make the buyer understand that they can speak freely at any time. And that's setting expectations. You don't want to guess that they're speaking freely. And if you don't set expectation and ask them to speak freely, that they're not going to speak freely the entire time. They'll just answer questions.
Yeah, and we'll never really know what they're thinking.
But they'll answer questions and people will think that they're answering. So that's why getting a no, on a personal note, one of the top technology companies in Philadelphia that was getting a ton of investors, top floor of one of the buildings, he met with me for breakfast. And I said, Alex, I appreciate all this time, but I'm just here to tell you that we can't do business together. Can you please pass the salt? So I had to sit there the whole breakfast, but it took me a while to realize he took time for breakfast with me. But what most people don't realize is that he was able to introduce me to other people afterwards. It might not have been good for him, but he trusted me to be able to introduce somebody else down the road. Salespeople are very transactional. Yeah, so you have to, go ahead.
So because of the way that you handled his no, there was still trust built for later, or just the way that you handled the whole process?
I think I was trying to be on point to develop so much trust that he could say anything he wants.
Yeah.
And then when somebody says, you know what, I'm okay telling Alex, no, thank you, because I don't think he'll get defensive. I don't think he's going to try to sell me more. And so that's the biggest win for a salesperson on a professional note, because that means you got the person in front of you to believe you and trust you on there to tell you the truth.
So we need to come back to this mindset piece and like how, even how to shift out of the, taking things personally, if that is something someone struggles with. I think it's something I struggle with, frankly. But I want to make sure, we really touch on this because I think it's a really, really great point that you're bringing up is so there's the prospecting side and then there's the conversion side. And with the prospecting side, we're basically going to algorithmically look at the different activities that could result in success and match those up based on the amount of energy that the enterprise has to focus on marketing and sales. And ideally, there's several people within marketing that can prospect different areas and specialize and improve. But early on, if there's a kind of a seller and doer, then there's a certain amount of time that we have to spend fulfilling, and then a certain amount of time that we can actually spend on growth activities. And we have to strategically decide the right blend of marketing and sales.
That's true. It's true. Marketing always gets the money. Marketing always gets the time, and marketing says they're in sales. So we're in the corner. We're in the corner when people are done. We're like, okay, anybody ready? So because we always hear the stories. Well, listen, we tried so much marketing. We always hear the same stories, right? And we're like,
it sounds like you have strong thoughts on this, not as a salesperson, not as a marketer.
marketing is important.
Totally.
Yeah. Marketing will generate interest. Sales will generate a conversation. And that's how we put it, plain and simple. Oh, that's interesting. I saw that video, or I saw that. It's interesting. But they didn't take action. So who's going to reach out to that person? Because the world always will say that's interesting. I probably said that's interesting to 522 things last week, and I probably bought one.
So it goes from that's interesting to let's have a conversation.
Right. To how do we have a conversation? Who's following up with that algorithm? Is there a number? Is there a name? Is it a lot of it is emails? A lot of it is through HubSpot, Salesforce. You name all of it. There's a lot of algorithm emails on there, and some of it can be successful depending on where they're hitting it. And there's just a mixed blend of 101 is how do you do outreach, and it's so. If you don't mind me sharing that, what happened in COVID was eye-opening for many organizations that were not prospecting. The well was dry. Their marketing didn't bring in leads. It's very dangerous to create an organization that doesn't have good prospecting. So we have what we call prospecting cadence. We have a formula, not just the toaster, but also the terminology, and that's more of a senior leadership discussion than an individual discussion, if that makes sense.
Senior leadership, so basically people that lead a sales team.
Correct. We live in two different worlds, and ours, I'm talking to you about the behavior and the styles, but then if we see there's something that's needed, we got to get leadership involved to say you got to arm your salespeople with certain things.
Yeah.
If not, they're going to battle without a Kevlar. They're going to battle with no ammo. They're going to, we got to see where people are, and we have a good way of spotting things out.
And so what I'm hearing you say is basically having a cadence for prospecting and be able to see where people are in the pipeline.
Correct. But also to say, is there a cadence? Is there a way that how it's done? What's the heartbeat? Is it different each week? Is it maybe here, maybe here, maybe here? We just need prospects. Like what's the cadence of the prospecting? And if a lot of companies, sometimes when they go from startup to right when they're emerging, there's like, okay, we got a bunch of clients here, but we don't know how they got in. So we need to create a process for prospecting to make sure our new sales hires playbook, we call this sales playbook, and then figured out everything about how they're onboarded, how they're trained, that's more white collar, blue collar and white collar sales, but I don't want to go in a different road there.
No, it's really cool. I'd love to dive into that with you more. When you say prospecting for you, is that on the sales side, or is that on the lead generation side?
So, everybody's got two different ways. So lead generation is really sometimes marketing, right? When the salesperson is not involved. When that salesperson is involved, it is prospecting.
Yeah.
So if they're given a lead saying, hey, this customer filled out something on our form on our website, that salesperson will reach out. It doesn't matter if it's mortgage, whatever it is, that salesperson will reach out. In that industry of mortgage, unfortunately, it's pretty accurate. People need a mortgage to buy a house, right? But every other things could be maybe-ish, right? So people fill out forms all the time. So the salesperson's job is that's a prospecting activity, is there enough of that to drive the success to hit the revenue of what the organization does? If it's not enough, then that person needs to generate their own leads and their own prospecting. And that's what that toaster was, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah. And so how much, like what percentage of time do you think people need to spend prospecting versus closing? Do you see any patterns with that?
Um, you know, I don't. It depends on the types of companies.
Well, in their marketing efforts, like I can see there's so many different variables with it. I'm just wondering if you see like like a high level, like, you know, I'm working with a company right now that has 8 salespeople and 2 appointment setters. So they have 2 people that are prospecting like full time for 8 closers, and I'm like, that's awesome. I want to create an organization like that.
Right. So the appointment. So they call them BDRs, right? So the BDRs are the ones that's setting the appointment, and then the other people are the ones that here's our history with those appointment setters and salespeople and closers, because they're told, okay, I'm closing it. I said, well, who qualified the lead? So is it the appointment setter? No. And then the CEO said, why not? I said, look at the job description you set up for the appointment setter. They are given compensation in the amount of appointments that are scheduled. They don't care if they're qualified or not.
I would say that would be faulty. I feel like we have to incentivize them based on closed deals, like to appointment setters.
Correct. There's some of them that do, but sometimes when we get them, we see where they are and we say, okay, that appointment setter set up an appointment, no conversation. So the salesperson has to do one-on-one and be the doctor.
Right.
So if that's the case, that's great. But sometimes there's mixed formula where they're like, that person's receiving the call saying, isn't this supposed to be qualified before he gets to me? Like, I'm here to close it. You mentioned the closers. They're thinking, no, I'm just here to close it, to say, what else can I help you? So those companies that get it right, it's good. It's really, really good. But they have to be on the same page. And we're seeing a lot of disconnect.
Yeah, I'm thinking through some of the challenges I've heard from members and like their journeys with it. And I'm curious, like, how do you recommend like a sales team solve its own problems like that?
It's leadership, sales leadership 101, right? So small companies have sometimes a CEO that is because they can't afford a VP of sales. So the CEO is also the sales leader.
Sure.
That can happen in any emerging company, depending on if they're self-funded or funded from others. But let's do professional services. I don't want to take out just technology, professional services. Typically, there's the CEO and then a couple sales reps. Once it gets to a certain point, then they need a VP of sales, but there's a fine line of how that can happen based on revenue. So the accountability is key, right? Managing the lead. So to answer your question, it's really on the leadership. CEOs, no fault of their own, they've been trained to be CEOs. And once they add more sales responsibility, they better seek knowledge to articulate what the behaviors of their teams are. If not, the teams will dictate the behavior of the company.
One of the things that we work with our members on is to like give them share with them the best practices around systems and playbooks. And one of the things that has really worked with us is really building out like a rhythm for diving into these problems, like once a week, spending 60 to 90 minutes looking at like prioritizing the biggest issues and having a space to actually put issues. So as a sales team, it's like, hey, what are the issues? And then let's spend like a little bit of time each week addressing these issues, identifying, discussing, and solving them.
That's really good. That's really, really good, because then it prepares them for that discussion, right?
Yeah.
And that's really good, because if not, that it's tough to ask them on the fly, and I think that's great dialogue.
And it's interesting to like talk to entrepreneurs about this, and they're like, oh, I don't need that stuff because I'm already talking to my team. Like, we're already doing that. Like, we don't need to set a meeting. And I'm like, yeah, you're either always doing it or never doing it. You know what I mean? Like that's the problem with like not having actual time set aside, is you're probably either not really ever doing it, or you're spending way too much time. And it's like, hey, like what if we just did this in an hour versus spending 4 to 8 hours on it? When when you start working with people on like the prospecting side, the sales side, the conversion side, what are the top breakthroughs or like the top leverage points that you normally see?
So you're almost talking that, just so I'm understanding it, you're talking about like the sales cycle from
Yeah, like the
beginning
sales
to
process.
for the sales process.
Yeah,
When they
and
don't,
closing too.
yep, when they don't lose control and they know every step of the way what's going to happen. It doesn't matter if it's 2 months or 12 months.
So that's the no guess.
There is zero, and that's how we know it's efficient. Because what happens is most people are trying to say, well, why would I do that? And it's I said, imagine living less stress in sales. Your pipeline's going to be stronger if your in between is stronger. If your pipeline, if everything in your pipeline is managed, you don't have to worry. And you want to protect. We tell leaders, we're here to protect the mindset of salespeople so they can perform. We're the most temperament, up and down and sideways, so what happens is we're here to protect them from themselves, to do the activities so there's less stress, so they can actually do more in the beginning. And when they can manage, it takes them, some people get it in a day. It's like riding a bike. They're like, I wish I would have known that like a year ago. Some people take a week, some people take a month. Learners are different. But at the end of the day, it's really about, less stress. If you know what's happening, that's how we see success. We see people managing the pipeline well. Again, nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect.
And so it keeps coming up, the mindset piece of this. So, how do you work with entrepreneurs or salespeople around their mindset?
I think are they a good student? Not just your cohort or anything like this. Just what are they like? What are they trying to do? Are they going to be accepting to understand how to be better? If not, we're not a good fit at all. At all, we're not a good fit because it's my way, but it's not working. But it's my way, it's not working. We can't help those, unfortunately, right? So to understand it's not a lot of stress, to understand to take it in phases rather than trying to solve world peace in a month, saying, hey, there's about 6 or 7 different things to work on here. Let's master each one over time rather than getting 30% proficient. Everybody wants podcast versions of this. So it says, okay, just give it to me. That's how you hear it. Just give it to me, right? I said, well, proof's in the pudding. Give it back to me and let me know how it went. Right?
I don't get just that last part. Like everybody wants the podcast version of just
knowledge.
How to sell it.
Not knowledge. But we're looking at it on the side going, we'd like to see you use that gym. So let us know how it goes. Because if not, then all you're doing is learning it, but not applying it.
Right.
So that's the part that's the key, is the application of what they learn. And some people, for some reason, they've applied what they learned, and some people are very new to really applying what they're learning because they realize, wow, it's a behavioral change. It's my mindset's changing. I'm more open-minded. How did I become that? Yes, it's evolvement. So it's just protecting them from themselves. So that's why coaching is really important. Coaching is hugely important because then they can understand their progress and they answer their own questions of where success was. So that once you say, okay, well, I turned the wrench left and then I turned it right. Well, that's probably how I should do it for everything for IKEA, right? Like nobody's going to tell you the answer. You got to kind of self-correct. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing this idea of like, there's like knowledge and then there's like wisdom, right? Like, so you can like know something, but then like the application of it is like wisdom. But it sounds like what I'm hearing too is that this can become like almost for lack of a better word, intoxicating, like just this type of behavioral shift and getting the results that it starts to bleed over into other areas of life.
I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, I think reading the buyers and prospects is one of the first ones. People understand their relationships better. They're understanding the people around them better, friends and family. It's understanding, oh, that's why they're that tone. That's why they cautious. That's why they kind of do innuendos. Right? They're buyers just like everybody else. They're just family members and friends, right? So that and understanding, when you're able to move a buyer to make decisions on a very constant basis, you can do that on a lot of different things in life. You don't have to sell it. You just have to get people to believe in it. Right.
So with a name like I love, I mean, Alex, I love that. And in it when you with the name Sales Evolution, like what does that mean to you? Like the evolution of sales.
It's just, I always use good to great and great to exceptional. So its evolution is, when it's just from a professional standpoint, personally, as a team or as a company, everybody has different motives of saying, how do we do this? How do we get better? And it doesn't matter if it's IT, finance, whatever. We're just a department, right, of sales. So it is the evolution because motives behind all that are valuation of a company, right? You could have sales or you could really have good sales. Just because you have clients doesn't mean it's good sales. It could be knob and tube in the back, right? It could be bad prospecting. You just ran into clients. It's just, there's all these things of efficiency of referrals and all that. So people have motives and the evolution is how they get better. It's the same thing as everything else in life. I have a motive to lose weight, I have a motive to desire to run a marathon. How do you pick the right resources to do that? Because it's a 50-50 split of who's responsible, right? And a lot of people don't understand at the beginning their own responsibility. That's why when you do onboarding, it's really understanding how to be the student. And it's not just learning it. It's like we talked about, it's like how to apply. And some are cautious appliers, some are full frontal applier. So then we got to know how to feed and how to hold back, right? But in essence, risk management, everybody has a risk. They don't want to lose a client. They don't want to lose a prospect or whatever the words are, right? So they have to trust the process, of if people don't respond to you, reach out to them to say, maybe it's not a good time and we should try to push this off. People are like, no way. Why would I do that to my commission? And I said, living on hope is not good sales.
Hope Don't Float. I think that's from one of those great movies about divers, but I think it was Coast Guard divers in that one, right?
Yeah.
Very, very cool. Really enjoying this conversation. I kind of want to keep going, but I want to start wrapping it up. Let me just see if there's any other questions that our members had that I thought would really be valuable for you to answer in advance of the event on Thursday. This one I thought was like really, really valuable was like, what tips an individual from being a follower to a customer, and how do we identify the thing that pushed them over the edge to purchase?
A follower to a customer. So when somebody's a follower, there's a variety of different reasons for social media for that. But also you got to ask them permission. Said, hey, thanks. This is just an example. Thanks for following my page. Would it be okay for us to have a conversation to talk more about what your needs are and answer questions about what we do? Permission-based. Everything in sales, we didn't explore this too much, but everything is permission-based. Do I have your permission to have a dialogue? Not let's set up some time. Tone and words matter. and you make it non-threatening, and you find a dialogue. We always say, let's figure it out if you or I are a good fit or not. People are like, wait, me a good fit for you? Like, yeah, maybe you're not a good fit for us. So,
Totally.
so the dialogue is very non-threatening, non-salesy. They're like, oh, okay, I'll step into this door. Sure. And some people are like, no, 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 thanks. So the question is the person on the back end willing to send those notes to the person to hear no, thank you? And that's the part about taking it personal, right? Because everybody knows I want to convert that follower, but I don't want to hear no. So it's an art and a science saying the activity's there. The activity's there. There's certain words you could put out there saying, thank you for following me. Would you be open for dialogue for me to answer questions about what we do? And also I have some questions for you as well. No
How,
thanks, no response. Go ahead.
no, how do you get a salesperson, or to feel more comfortable with a no? By saying it's the best thing that can ever happen, changing the belief.
I think that's, to your point, we do that early to say that's the best feeling in the world is to get a no. Anybody could get a yes, but to get a no is to move on.
Yeah,
Imagine living life in innuendos where you had 150,000 not sures.
totally.
How stressed would we be? Right? So
Right.
getting people to have clarity, I said, that's it. No's don't mean much. They may mean, if they're personal, we remove the personal, because that's tough to be in the business. If you take it personal, then you kind of barely get into it.
Yeah.
Right. So a certain skill set, or outsource it, give it to somebody else, to do those activities. So people are always stuck in trying to solve. They're stuck. They're trying to solve to say, how do I do this? How do I do that? And are they willing to do it? It's a great question.
So, I mean, you mentioned like the sales playbook earlier in this, and I mentioned like systems, and how that's one of the kind of the modules that we work with our members on, and work like we have some resources around systems. Um, but how would you like related to sales and within an enterprise, like for an entrepreneur, how to grow while building and maintaining sales systems?
It's a good question. So it's a little bit of a different conversation of what we call an assessment to figure out who they want to become. And so there's different pillars. There's assessment on strategy, assessment on human capital, assessment on tools and technology, assessment on processes, KPIs. So most people that invite in is saying, hey, can you look under the hood? We don't know what we don't know. And most people do that for every department. It could be, can you look at our IT department? Because IT won't say what they need. IT will take a look at the servers first, look at the computers, laptops to see how. So sales is the same way. Most people don't realize that. They said, oh, you can look at the infrastructure. I said, yeah, you look at the infrastructure, and through an assessment, it depends what you're shooting for. If you're shooting for scalability in 5 years of certain EBITDA and 10x, and or just sustainable growth, then there's recommendations based on the goal of it. Everybody has different goals. Everybody says, of course, they want sales. But what happens is we have to tell them about infrastructure. How are you going to support sales? Do you have the want to lead more people? And that's a big answer. Most people are like, no. And that's why most of our economy is small businesses, but it's a whole different topic. So, you got to be careful how fast you grow, because you have to have the infrastructure for delivery operations and stuff like that. So that's, to answer your question, is you got to take a look inside first. People have to raise their hand. There's an assessment, and then either we help them do the recommendations and implementation, or they do it themselves, depending on what they're trying to do on there. Hopefully that answers what you're saying.
It does, but in like I feel like then as it evolves over time, like on an ongoing basis, like there's kind of a joke that I've heard within Junto, within entrepreneurs, that every time a business triples, like everything breaks, like all the systems break. So it's like, I feel like we can get something in place, but then it evolves over time. Is that true within sales? Like, does a script need to evolve every time the company triples? Like, it seems like it wouldn't need to, right? Like
No,
that
no,
script
no,
works.
it doesn't. But and I think I'm reading you properly, and I apologize for this too. I'll give you an example. Salespeople come in an organization, and then a company evolves. Either the services, the product, it's really doing well. But then they add more products and services, and some of them are bigger and deeper and wider. What can happen is those salespeople are not attuned to being able skillfully to do the bigger products and services. They fall back to the beginning ones at the company. So that's a disconnect. So do you have the right seats on the right bus? Right? So companies are like, wait a second, we just sold $50,000 and it took us a year. Why don't we sell $500,000 product and service? So depending, when your company triples, usually it's around that. It's around the products and services that have done very well of how they're sold, manipulated, priced. And sometimes the salespeople, yes, the script can change a little bit because it's a variety of different things other than one. So they have to grow with growth of the organization, and that falls back on the leader. Can the leader help salespeople pivot and change as the company does? If not, to your point, they could struggle.
Yeah, I'm curious from your standpoint, like when you think of a company, how important is the product versus sales? Like, do you think of it as like 80% product, 20% sales, or what's your mental frame on that?
That's a very big opinion on it. Mine is just a small opinion on that. I do think no matter what, you have to have a good product and service.
Sure.
You do. I mean, the market has to respond to it. You have to if not, if you're selling DVD players, I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
So there is a big part to that. And some people, that's why the assessment is to the market is, are they, so one note right there, just to share with you, is the spray and pray is really not good for a lot of merging and startups. They need to pick a lane, pick an industry, pick transportation, pick logistics, pick healthcare, pick whatever it is, and master that, rather than everybody's going to be a prospect. Salespeople don't do well there. They need a lane and a focus.
Yeah, because and have a certain success rate, right? Like, you know, um, do you have a thought on like the success rate that it should be for a salesperson, selling like a service or a SaaS? Um,
Depends on leadership, and I'm just going to fall back on that. We've seen great people. Just you can imagine, just incredible leadership is that team's going to flourish. They're going to have the tools, resources, persons there. But when the manager is not skilled or doesn't really as attuned, then salespeople, they may do well or not. Salespeople traditionally need guidance. They need structure. The word accountability is not a bad thing. It's not. Helps them understand their own success, if that makes sense.
sure.
Right? Saying,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I had success here. Thanks for reminding me. And the manager keeps them locked in to say, hey, it's going to be okay. Friday's around the corner. Next week's the new week. Just that's the role of a leader, just to make sure they're attuned to they don't get in their own way. If a CEO of a small company has a couple of salespeople, they're not doing all that, they got to be careful, because you're going to get derailment, and then it's half. And people that are very much entrepreneur salespeople, they adjust well, they know how to pivot, they don't need a lot of management, they don't need a lot of leadership, and they crush it. They make top money. Those are it's like the NBA or any sport. Those people that are super skilled, everybody wants those. Everybody else could be average Joe or Mary.
Yeah. How does sales evolution work with entrepreneurs?
So I'll use Jason as an example, right? Jason from Hover, right? Jason was trying to achieve more success. We had a dialogue, we had a couple of dialogues. He was just more curious to understanding how do you move people along to certain stages of the pipeline, and was he being very efficient about it? And then he said, you know what? I really need to create structure and efficiency in what I'm doing. So that's what we do with training and coaching, is just bringing more structure and knowledge base, and the coaching, which I think he probably most people value more, is the coaching than probably the training. Training, of course, we always say anybody could train, but the coaching is where we have certain styles of onboarding, and then we help people learn how to be a student, and then we teach them how to call us, they call us, and then how to structure the call so they can just go down the list of what they need answered. And then we do ad hoc. Ad hoc means anytime, any day, they call one of us, anything on their mind. I got a meeting, I want to review, whatever it is. And then we kind of scale them. And then, we view their success and document their success. So that's an individual. When it's a team, we typically get with the leadership for goals and objectives. Is what is it that they're trying to do? And of course, everything revolves around more revenue. But at the same time, it's really understanding and saying, okay, who's the leader? If they're going to be led and managed, we teach the leader what it is that they should do with our stuff. Because if we go in an organization that doesn't have good leadership, we're just going to go run in and run out with students. We have to get the good leadership to reinforce what we're doing, talk about it in our meetings. So we have good calls and monthly calls with the leadership team to say, here's what we're doing this month, here's how to talk about it. Most companies historically have only done leading and managing. They didn't do coaching. So they would do leading, managing, mentoring. So we tell them to say, hey, we're not going to tell you to get more busy, but here's what we're doing so you can reinforce that in your weekly meetings or bi-weekly meetings with your sales team. So the sales team sees that it's important to the organization what we're doing. So it's like a triangle of success.
Yeah.
Right. So we split responsibilities, 33% the owner, 33% the students, 33% us. We'll bring the donuts to make it 34. And so what we do is we that's setting expectations. So the companies realize like, okay, in order this to culture change, we need to be part of this. And if need be, some owners we recommend, and some sales leaders, we say, why don't you come to our sales leadership class? If there's a KPI issue, if there's a management issue for the sales people, then we're only training and coaching, we're not managing. There's a fine line of responsibilities.
Yeah.
The why didn't you conversation doesn't really come from us. But sometimes they ask us to be the fractional outsource sales leader.
VP of sales.
Yeah, so they ask us to come in and be a chameleon and all that. Hopefully that explains it.
Yeah, I think it does. So you have different offerings for the individual versus the team. Makes total sense. There's a lot of things, Alex, that you said that really resonated with me. Like I love the habits around sales and like building that confidence through structure. Like if we don't have confidence, then we won't create structure, and then structure creates that accountability. Like the identity piece of sales, and like the importance of not just understanding the process, but also understanding the priorities and the behaviors, and like the attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love how you said like this is a life skill too. It's not just like a business skill. Like this will apply to our ability to influence within our life. And I'm really interested to dive more into the leadership piece of sales more with you in the future. Maybe it's a topic that we can bring up on Thursday, but really appreciate your time and excited to get to know you more.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. I love to talk about sales. Sorry for, hoarding the time in there, but I get excited about all stuff around that. And I learned a lot from you as well of what you value and how you do things as well. And I'm sure I'll, continue learning